What's up, everybody? Today, we have Dennis Underwood, the CEO of Crucible. He's a serial founder, serial entrepreneur, serial bootstrapper, which we'll get into here in a minute. Dennis, anyway, a lot to dive into. Thanks for coming on the show. I'm really looking forward to speaking with you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate being on here.
Awesome. Hey, so let's just start right where we are today. Tell us a little bit about Crucible and what you do there.
Yeah, sure. Cyber Crucible is even though it's my third company, it's my first product company. It's a piece of software. It does really technical things to automatically find and stop hackers that are trying to access data or identities, like ransomware kind of things, stuff like that. We use genetic AI under the hood, but the whole goal of this whole exercise with Cyber Crucible is to hide all of the technical stuff and not have to make our customers be experts and just do it all automatically. And that's it's worked out really well. You know, people are kind of like, oh, it's like an easy button. And I'm like, well, Staples kind of has that locked down, but yes, so that can't be my logo.
But that's exactly what it is. And so is it pretty much a plugin that somebody can bring into their corporation and it plugs into all of their cybersecurity network? Like, how does it interact with existing tools at companies?
It's just an installer. Installs. Most employees and users don't even know it's there. That's by design because the security folks are like, well, I don't want to have all these like phone calls from people. We like to be the only ones in the know. So it installs, it goes out. They're super fast, super easy, very low, memory and processor consumption. So it doesn't really affect anything. When it works as it should, and it does, what happens is that the end user, the customer, secretaries, accountants, salespeople, whatever, have absolutely no idea that we just stopped like a major attack against the organization. Only the IT and security people know. I think it's the way it should be. People shouldn't be bothered with that any more than, do you know the status of, well, okay, a great example, you look at those elevator like inspection cards, like, and you're like, oh, look at that, Bill. Good job, Bill. I don't know what had happened or why or how you did this shit, but it's kind of like that, right? You're like, we're going to find out one day there's no such thing as an elevator inspector. It was just pieces of paper because we never see them, right? They're never around. And that's kind of how we want to be.
Right. We're not advertising that just last week, the elevator cable actually broke with 5 passengers in it, right? Like, we don't want to advertise that. We're just advertising, hey, it's been inspected. It passed the test.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, hey, come visit your local elevator inspector person, and watch him work. Like, nobody wants to do that, right?
Right.
So that's kind of how we work. And it works out well. We're able to be very preventative. And we're about as exciting for most companies as the fire suppression system. Another good analogy where no one is like up at night thinking, or the elevator thinking like, I wonder if my hotel's had the elevator checked recently. No one does that, right? If you do, maybe talk to someone, like about that.
Right. That's hilarious. So one question that I have, just because I know that anytime a new technology comes out and I'm thinking about incorporating it into my company, is just like ease of installation. And so obviously when you're dealing with cybersecurity, you're going and plugging into existing infrastructure. Obviously, you've got a number of clients, so you probably have a great swath of experience, right? Going and connecting to different, whatever, data sources, workflows. But how do you make that? I'm just curious from my own perspective, and some of my clients are business owners as well, right? Like, how do you make that effortless, painless? Because when I think of plugging, like, I'm all about cybersecurity. I don't want people trying to get my stuff or my employees' stuff or any of my customers' data. But the pain of plugging something into my systems and then trying to figure out how to interconnect everything is always a hurdle for me.
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, you're absolutely right. And then I think cybersecurity, it's not just all technology, but cybersecurity salespeople have done a great job of like violating the trust of the business owners, right? Where you're, oh, it's so easy. And then you're just kind of like, why did I ever do this? Right. And so that happens a lot, right? There's no one to call, like there's no like, karma police you can call and say, oh, they lied to me. Right. So we normally have to do a proof of concept. Actually, we do a quick deployment, maybe like 15 agents, 15 endpoints, roughly, maybe some 10, whatever. And then we say, yeah, try it out for a couple weeks. What we see during our engagements, because things are so frictionless, I felt that should be a key if you're having a frictionless automated product, you should have a frictionless onboarding, right? So we've been that didn't just happen, right? It took a lot of time and effort to get it there. And you see like a very high stress level whenever people first like go to put the software in because they're like, yeah, you're a lying, get another lying cyber person, like what's going to happen to me, and then the stress level's super high and it goes way low when they're just kind of like, wait, nothing broke. There was no like sirens in the background, there's like no cat screaming or anything, right? So it's kind of did work
Mhm.
and nothing is interrupted, right? You might catch a hacker, maybe like it's normally, yeah, that's that low probability, right? But like,
Mhm.
and then the stress level towards the end of the proof of concept goes way up because there are cyber products that don't really do anything. They're just like shells of products.
Mm.
'Cause it's very much a trust based kind of world. Like an MRI machine, you're like, does it do the MRI or not? I didn't see. With hackers, it's kind of hard, right?
Right.
Um, and so the stress level goes up towards the end of the proof of concept because they're like, wait, show me it actually does anything, right? So we have some things
Mm.
to show how we are working and analyzing and stuff behind the scenes that we don't bother people with because that they have things to do, and
Sure.
so we do that, and then people say great, and then we align to their buying schedule. And that's really all it is. It's really easy.
That's awesome. So that 2 week proof of concept is essentially what allows them to see that it's frictionless, relatively low pressure. And then you do have the data to share with them, even if no cyber attacks come in, of how everything's working in the background, just to give them the assurity.
Yeah, we have
Sweet.
this one feature where we manipulate what data software can see, right? And
Okay.
sometimes we'll run into software that is asking for data that it probably shouldn't have.
Hmm.
And a great example would be like your accounting software. I don't know, or Adobe is a great example actually. Adobe
Okay.
products, right? And they love scanning the network and scanning all the systems looking for, I'm assuming, looking for unlicensed Adobe products. And they can get pretty
Mm.
aggressive with it too, like more than hackers actually, like, and so if someone's using like a lot of Adobe products, that's a great way to like show, hey, look at this, like your Adobe Photoshop is like scanning your entire file systems on your network looking for something,
Mm.
and so that's a good thing to show normally, to show, hey, we're actually helping you in a way that not steal Adobe, right? But we're helping you with showing you that this thing is working, but it's also
Yeah.
not interfering with anyone who's actually like a web designer. That's a great example.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense, right? You can basically see the different programs and what they're doing on your
Right.
computer. Your software is in there showing, I guess, tracking all of that. And so that's what gives them the assurity. That's cool. So,
Right.
all right, quick question. When we get into AI, and I've heard, because this is my own, was talking with a friend of mine, and I am not an expert. You are in this space, which is why I'm going to ask you. Everything is apparently connected, right? Like, sure, I'm talking to ChatGPT, or I'm talking with, so I have a few different AIs that I use for very specific purposes, right? I use
Right.
Claude, right, for another one, and things like drafting contracts, if you will, right? Confidential information within, AI. And is that connected to everyone else's AI out there, given that it's machine learning, right? And is trying to get smarter by adapting to whatever it is, your own habits or ways of doing things. So when it comes to cybersecurity, and then you're infusing that with AI, on one hand, I can see the benefit, right? Like, it's probably way better to have an AI go and look at all the data, assess it, and tell me what's wrong versus having 100 humans, right? Probably offshore doing the same sort of thing and trying to detect anomalies. But then on the other side, is it connected to everyone else's AI? How do you build some sort of a firewall to make sure that all the data is housed and localized?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's a complex subject. I don't know if you ever seen like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. There's like the PG-13 like mailroom scene where like he just goes nuts. If you ever seen it, you haven't seen it ever, look it up on YouTube. And there's like
I'm
he just
writing it
goes
down.
nuts about like this. He has like strings and a whiteboard, and he has all these connections. Supposed to get ready to uncover like a spy network, and he's just going nuts talking about all different connections. And I see a lot of like the AI kind of like privacy, AI compliance,
Mhm.
AI security sales pitches or descriptions kind of look like that. Where I sit here and again, I'm saying we have some stuff and we're like, hey, here's the easy button,
Yeah.
And then the other person gets up and they go into this 30-minute long discussion. And I'm just like, this is just like the It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia skit where he's like trying to like wow these board members who probably don't even want to be there, like, and they're,
Yeah.
he's going this big, very complicated discussion about
Sure.
AI and algorithms and formulas, right? It's like everyone's worst nightmare from high school or college, right? Like you're stuck in calculus too. You weren't supposed to be there, and they're doing their thing. And so,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right about your concern. And I'm seeing it more and more with companies. You're right about the in cybersecurity.
Mhm.
There's two ways of looking at products. One is to be preventative and to be predictive, like us, where we have to figure out what data to get, how to process it, and what to do with it before the hacker can get anywhere. Then there's the different problem. It's not better or worse from a scientific standpoint. Better for the company not to go down and then someone a month later say, "Hey, I found it." And you're like, "Well, I'm bankrupt. Like, thanks." Which happens a lot, like where someone comes later on.
Mm,
But,
mm,
all the folks that are doing the visibility part, which is I'm going to collect gobs and gobs of data, and then I'm going to try to process it and hope that I can do some good before it gets too late, right?
mm.
That's where most of cybersecurity sits, right? Which is, and so yes, they do need help going through that data. I've been in that world for years, right? You want data, you got data, and there's more than you can ever look at, right? It's like, okay, how do I find a bad guy in this mess? And as fast as I'm trying to find the bad guy, there's 10 times more mess coming my way.
Mhm.
Almost like every skill with like, I Love Lucy with like the chocolates and everything else. That's just the world. So I mean, it is a problem, right? And I think the
Mhm.
AI can help them with that. The non-tech analogy I give,
Mhm.
if you're looking for the preventative, then we're like the cop walking the beat who's able to see,
Mm.
walking through the neighborhood, seeing, oh, look, there's someone trying to break into the front door. Let's go and grab him, stop that.
Right. Okay.
Um, I don't know if you've been to London, but like, London's famous for like,
One
okay, yeah, and so maybe you saw a camera, 'cause there's like a camera. I think there's like as many cameras as people. I don't know, but like there's a
Right.
ton of cameras there, right? And they're always
Yeah.
recording. There's no hope of like, someone, being assigned to each camera to be able to find stuff. But,
Mhm.
they have recording for later on. If someone broke in, they can probably go back and look and say, okay, on Friday night, yes, there was no cop walking the beat, but we did see someone break in.
Mhm.
And they drove away. It looks like earlier in the day they had a Yorkshire pudding. Good for them. Keep their calorie count up. And then congratulations, you got robbed. And then that's kind of what those guys are doing, right? Is they're trying to figure out,
Right.
after the fact. So using AI to help with that is definitely a good thing. It's just not my thing. Been there,
Yep.
done that. Had nearly unlimited budget, unlimited
Sure.
resources, federal government, and I was like, this is not working for anybody. Like I have unlimited
Right.
access to inventions, like, and I was like, this is not going to be working, especially in a little ransomware where the patterns between attacks have gone away. They're mutating
Mhm.
automatically. And then they're using ransomware to take down the whole business. And I was like, well, no one wants you to run into the room after they've been ransomed and say, hey, anyone might be down, but I found the hacker. Like no one wants to hear that. That's how to get cussed at. Like so we moved over to prevention for that reason.
Got it. So your approach with Cyber Crucible is really that preventative, looking for patterns, looking for behaviors that might signal that like a hacker is getting in, and then you're leveraging AI to help with that. Just want to make
Yeah,
sure
what
I'm
happens
capturing
is
that correctly.
it. So first of all, when the hacker's mutating every attack, and
Mhm.
that old model of like, oh, I'm going to find the hacker, like the banana, he names every piece of malware banana.exe. Like, okay, look for fruit looking programs. Great. That's like the old way. It doesn't work, hasn't worked in a while, actually, and so we had to use AI to actually build up basically this really complicated formula of build the sensors, figure everything out, get the right data, and then say, okay, we have way too much data now, just like everyone else, right? So
Yep.
we're going to use genetic AI to find a combination of a little bit of those variables that'll give us the same answer, right? Like you're not going to try. Genetic
Mm.
AI is used a lot by like pharmacy companies. Like you're not going to
Okay.
try every possible drug on someone and see which ones kill them, which ones work, which ones don't do anything, right? You're going to
Right.
find like a formula that works, right? And
Mhm.
so we have to use that to like pre-compute basically what combination of things work, and then send that down to the down to our software to be able to automatically do everything, right? So that's how we work. And there's no one like silver bullet, that is like, oh, this is the sensor with the one variable that will tell me all the secrets of the world, right? It's kind of like, okay, well, we have like 100 here, and the combination of information get together gives us a very clearish picture that we should stop this, right? And
Right.
that's worked well for us.
Awesome. Well, let's dive in a little bit to your past because I
Cool.
know you obviously doing the proactive approach with Crucible, but you've spent a lot of time in the post, right? Mortem, taking a look. Oh, you've got hacked. Let's go find out the perpetrator and arrest them, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your beginning. If we could go way back,
Oh
how
boy.
did you get into becoming an entrepreneur? Maybe you could
Yeah.
tell a little bit about that story because I think some of that plays into your experience, right, in the post, which is basically, it sounds like, pushed you to trying to proactively approach cybersecurity.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my first company was during a IT, like there was like an IT slowdown. A lot of people were being laid off, and I was still in college actually trying to get a job at Paving with Your College here in Pittsburgh. I was like what 19, had nothing to worry about, at that age. I think my rent was like $200 a month or something, which like no one could get now. I mean, yeah,
I
like
wish.
yeah, like an alleyway would be $200 a month now, maybe, like if you're lucky. So, um, so yeah, so basically it was a whole bunch of people my age now, that were being laid off and working for these like, applying for these entry level jobs. And I just kept getting shut down on interviews because for my first, real IT job, because all these people that were way more experienced than me were doing their thing. And so what I did was I actually, I just in frustration just spun around one day. I'd heard about this corp to corp thing they called it, like basically
Hmm.
independent contractor work. And I said, what if I do like Dennis Underwood, incorporated, not even knowing what that means,
Yeah.
and they were like, hey, young guy, we can get him cheap, we can fire him when we want to, so it worked. And of course, since I had very little expenses and pension was not on my radar, that didn't really matter, So that
Yep.
was my first business actually, and then eventually had to deploy for the military and came back, and I had given the business all the contracts to friends, colleagues in the industry, um, or people that were working the job, because at that point I had some my own contractors working, right? And I was like,
Okay.
well, like it's kind of like the thing, like if everyone knows Greg, right, and then like where Greg gets his paycheck changes, no one cares, right? It's
Right.
kind of like they're there for Greg, and so I
Right.
was like, well, me trying to do anything but just give the contracts, then it's a waste of my time. I got to get moving. So I moved to
Yep.
Charlotte when I came back and started up more security services. Actually, I realized I was a lot better at uh, finding things that normal people don't use programs for.
Hmm.
So I don't know if there's always that one employee, right, who is just not quite following the rules. They're just, they're kind of restless, right? That's where the hackers are, right? So I was like, well, I'm a lot better at finding these hackers than I am at following the rules, So I said, I'm gonna do security, and that worked, right? But then I did something really cool in cybersecurity that was very nerdy, but that made the NSA call, and then they offered me a job. There were no handcuffs. It wasn't like I was like hacking churches or something, but it was something cool for the good guys,
You
and
were just hacking
took
bakeries, so a little bit more
bakeries.
forgivable.
Yeah,
I get it. Yeah.
it was like it
Hey,
took 6 minutes of work. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I want to ask one thing because, and then let's get into the NSA
Yeah.
because very interested to hear more about what you were doing there. Going from being a B2B, right, individual contributor, contractor to a company, and then, getting the opportunity to take on more work. And so it sounds like you had the opportunity to hire some folks to work with you so that when you deployed on the military, they're able to keep the ship afloat, right, and continue to
Yeah.
run. It sounds like Dennis Underwood Incorporated when Dennis
Yeah,
Underwood was out.
whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever it was. And so the big transition, I don't know, I've noticed, actually I have some friends who have done similar things, but that seems to be the hardest part is when you go from being the face of the company to now you have team members being the face in the front and fielding some of these requests from stakeholders. Do you remember, like looking back, like what was that like, and what were some things that made you successful?
No, that's a great question. I think so. First of all, I kept things really simple with them. I
Hmm.
did 1099 with them. Of course, they're
Hmm.
that might make someone in your audience like an accountant be like, "Oh, you shouldn't do all that." And I was like, "Well, I was just doing stuff, like I was making money, paying rent, like
You're
so."
figuring it out. Yeah, you were
Yeah,
19.
yeah, and then so I mean, it was a little bit of a challenge. There were, you know, I'd get a phone call and say like, "Hey, I don't know, like Bill and Bill got in trouble and we fired Bill. He can't come back." And I was like, "Oh, okay. What did Bill do?" Turns out Bill was justified, but that didn't matter. I had to learn like, oh man, like I got a mess to clean up now.
Right.
Justified or not, like I can be morally justified, but that's not going to pay the contract. Like inside like
Right.
messes. There was a transition definitely with trusting people to do the job. Sometimes the client trusted them more than me, and I was like, well, what did I do wrong? Like so.
Mhm.
But it was just like they just and
Sure.
so it was good to back off a little bit. I can tell you, so I did transition everything out of like it was an LLC,
Okay.
and I did transition out of everything out of that. And when I was gone in Iraq for like what, a little over a year, I came back and I didn't know anything about shutting the business down or notifying anyone or anything, right? So like I came back to this like box, like little box of mail with like the increasingly threatening letters from the state saying like, where's your unemployment? Where's, all the things you have to do for
Right.
a business, right? And
Right.
then I was like, man, like I'm getting audited and sued, and I'm not even out of my uniform yet, and so I made a phone call to some woman in Harrisburg, it's the state of Pennsylvania,
Okay.
capital. And she was like,
Uh-huh.
"Oh, you just got back. Oh, honey." And she was like, I heard her click a couple buttons and she was like, "It's all taken care of now. Just, I'm glad you're back safe." And I was like, I went from like jail, like the office
Yeah.
space thing, like from prison to, like, we're so glad you're back home safe. And I was like, well, okay, obviously that business is dead now, but,
Right. Right.
like, trying to do what I did, I had a bigger problem on my hands.
Yes, it's probably an element of relationships, right? Was she a lawyer? Is that okay? Got it.
But
Was she,
well, she just worked for the state,
she just worked for the
so
state. Got it. So you just
yeah, just a
called
normal
them,
state
told them
employee who, yeah, I called, it was like the first person I called, and then they were
right.
like, and I guess once they realized what happened, they were like, I got married on my deployment night, right? So it's a pretty fast deployment, right? So,
Sure.
that was not on my list of things to worry about, like whenever I was leaving.
So yeah, that comes with a bit of difficulty. Then obviously employees, and then so you continued to run your own thing. The NSA knocked on your door. It was a good thing. What did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, they offered, they said, "Hey, we have this program. We'll start paying you. You'll get healthcare, everything like that, while you're getting
Sweet.
your master's." Yeah, and I had to deal with my wife that we would have our first kid after either my degree or a degree and a job. Basically, when the job I wasn't worried about, the degree takes time, right? And
Sure.
then so, she subtracted 9 months from my graduation because she's like, we already have the job, so let's just go and get this thing going. So, but yeah, it was good. I went to work there, did a lot of R&D type stuff, did a lot of operational development.
Mhm.
The thing that is interesting is that it's a government agency just like everywhere else, despite all the news and everything. So everyone who is kind of like an entrepreneur mindset, sometimes some people see it as a negative actually there because if they're lifetime government employees, then that doesn't really you know fit their jive. Like if,
Sure.
and it took a lot of adjustment on my way of doing things too. Like whenever I'd like have some super critical thing I need to get done, and then the
Yep.
person's kind of like, look, like, look, honey, I'm here and for the next 5 years, then I'm retiring. So I'm like, well, I can't wait 5 years. I'm like, I need this now. This is your job. This is your only job. And they're kind of like, oh, you didn't say please, like, and then it's all like, oh. So I had to learn how to navigate government a little bit, which is probably just like big,
Okay.
big corporations, right?
Sure.
But eventually I was like, man, eventually you reach a point, right? Where you're like, okay, I got to
Mhm.
get out of here, And
But
so
you were doing R&D and it was all in the cybersecurity space. Is that how you
it
started
was
to actually get?
operational. So it had to
Okay.
be things that worked. It couldn't be like I come back in a year with like a position paper on something that maybe we can look at in the future, right? And there are people that do that, and they're very good at
Sure.
that. um
Sure.
the need was kind of like more of like a startup where like you don't, unless you have a rich uncle or whatever, but like you don't have time, like payroll will not allow the company to survive long enough for you to pontificate forever, right? You need to like execute
Got it.
and get something fielded, get those first customers, get some revenue in the door and keep on growing. And that's kind of what I did over and over. Or I was like, okay, let's get some customers, get some people,
Mhm.
liking it. And then it's kind of ripped out of your hands and given to the sustainment people, right, to try to grow it in a more corporate way. Of course, they break everything, but like that's just the nature of it, right? But
1 out of 10, 1
yeah,
out of 10 will stick.
yeah. Then they'll come back to me when it's all broken sometimes, and I'm like, well, this is
Right.
not at all what I, did.
Was that where you got the itch to start doing more entrepreneurial things? I mean, you had that
Yeah, I mean,
opportunity
you
to
spend the
basically
time in there,
cycle.
then you're like, time to leave.
Sure.
I had a couple successes that I can't really talk about that like basically ended up
Mhm.
with some people were very happy and some people were not happy because when you're making disruptive things, especially in military government,
Mm.
those are two places where there's a lot of tradition. And if you're doing something that kind of breaks some traditions, you have two camps, and I ended up in with my team in like a separate building, actually, cut off from. There was some good reasons, but I was kind of like, okay, well, now I really am like a startup only working for the government. Now I'm like we're cut off, like for
You're in
operational
your own
reasons.
office space. You're not even in the
Yeah,
building
like we were in the
anymore.
basement,
Yeah.
a red stapler. And so I was like, okay, our
Paychecks still
power.
come in?
Yeah, everything was. I mean, the big
Okay.
government contracting companies mess with you constantly, right? We were
Sure.
subcontractors, right? But
Right.
I
Right.
remember, one check took 270 days to come in, which is not unheard of apparently for government.
Really?
And you're floating all those paychecks the whole time, right? All the paying your people, right? For that
Right.
sweet, sweet 5% margin or whatever you get,
Right.
But yeah,
And
I decided, I need to get out of this world. And so I
okay.
actually walked away from a few million in, run rate revenue, to move to Pittsburgh. I needed distance. I needed to put a flag down and say um, we are moving on from this world. I learned sticking
Mhm.
around there just ended up continuing that, right? Uh,
Mm.
Caused more stress on the customer side because they were losing people to like Apple and Microsoft and Silicon Valley and stuff, right?
Oh,
So
sure.
there was always this like you're abandoning me kind of like attitude, which I get,
Mhm.
like I think I was leaving and someone was like, "You're abandoning your country," and I'm like, "Let's just calm down for a second. I'm moving to Pittsburgh, not Moscow." It's kind of like let's just calm the rhetoric, And I'm sure the U.S. government can survive five guys leaving. So yeah, that's what I mean.
Happened next, right? You were doing that. You were basically creating companies, proof of concepts,
Yeah.
products, right? Putting them out there, getting customers, and then left the NSA and you started your own thing, doing the same thing, just now not working as a government contractor.
Yeah, and then I ended up leaving, like that lasted
Okay.
for a few years. And then basically still beholden to the same people, right? But
Hmm.
then I was like, I was looking for a marketing opportunity or market opportunity, let's put it that way.
Okay.
For like there has to be some market shift, some evidence that it's worth leaving that stability, right? For
Yeah.
something greater, right? And so that happened when I was actually, I worked a lot with keeping an eye on hackers, and they started complaining about losing revenue on their criminal operations because there was so much data being stolen that they were, having trouble selling it. So it was a supply and demand issue. There's only so many
Mm,
people out there ready to buy, that kind of stuff, stolen databases and things like that, right? So there were
sure.
some fits and some adjustments. They tried a couple things, and then the ransomware I saw was starting to like take off, and I was like, "That's the emperor no clothes moment," and all the hackers are going to ship there. And as their like final like chef's kiss, like on the way out the door, they're like, "I need a ransom," to get their money, right? And I was like, and companies are going to have a hard time ignoring that, and
Mm,
EDR firms had, security firms had been hiding how poorly they've been performing, for years. It's just
sure.
getting worse. And I was like, that's the market opportunity right there. I need to leave here, get some distance. Two guys on my team quit in protest. And I was like, what? I don't even know what that means. Like I told them, like, look, we're shipping the company over to Pittsburgh. You can work more
Sure.
remotely. And I said, but
Hmm.
we're going to work on this commercial product and it's going to be wildly successful. Um, your founder stock will be life changing, and let's do
Hmm.
that, and then they quit. And I was like, I don't like, I just hired two Carnegie Mellon graduates. I don't see how this doesn't affect me, but we
Yeah.
moved right before COVID lockdowns, actually.
Oh,
I ended
wow.
up renting an indoor sports arena to put all of my people in. Because we had people coming in and out asking questions, doing R&D
Sure.
projects, and I
Yeah.
needed space. Indoor sports arenas need a little bit of cash, and it was a good arrangement, to be able to work in the right way, and it worked out well. R&D was done on like soccer fields and basketball courts and stuff. It was pretty crazy.
That is pretty awesome. And so that was right around the time that the pandemic hit,
Yeah,
and you're able to sustain through the pandemic. Obviously, everybody's now working in a remote environment. I imagine cybersecurity needs,
yeah.
right, literally going through the roof. And so, how did you? Was that when Cyber Crucible was founded? Was that
The company was
2019,
already
2020?
there, kind of, but
Okay.
we transitioned as Cyber Crucible started feeling revenue. I actually had an
Hmm.
operating. I gone savvier from just turning around and saying Dennis Underwood Inc. Like not knowing what that
Yeah,
meant,
yeah, yeah.
and it was not really a true incorporation anyway. So,
Sure.
but I turned around, so Cyber Crucible. I had Cyber Delivered, which was like the government contracting shell, basically,
Okay.
like a shell company, and
Hmm.
then as revenue, started building in Cyber Crucible, I started shifting operations and revenue over to Cyber Crucible and shutting
Hmm.
down Cyber Delivered is kind of how it happened. So it was there
Okay.
just to hold the intellectual property and there for future use. And then I realized that dream finally, as a commercial Delaware-based C corporation. During that time, when I started selling the product and selling services and doing different things to grow a company.
And you talked about, I don't know if this was a difficult thing, but it was obviously something that weighed on you, right? And you had to make a decision, leaving the security of a government contract to going out and starting this thing on your own. Obviously higher risk, but higher reward, right? Good opportunities. Like looking
Yeah,
back, did that work out for you? Was that the right move?
it did. I think I should have. It would have been easier if I had left that kind of nest earlier.
Mm,
Looking back, I understand where the government folks come from. When they were losing all their people to like Steve Jobs or whatever. And so I get it. That they want to keep their talent. But there was definitely like a major effort to keep all of their people actually producing.
yeah.
In the commercial world, that's like, well, what do you mean actually producing? Well, in the government, there's the old 10% are actually doing all the work kind of thing, right? Um, and so what happened was that we were in that 10%, right, or the 1%
Yeah.
or whatever number that is, and there was definitely some structure in place to keep us from straying too far.
Mm,
Wasn't
hmm.
malicious. It was all about them trying to figure out, okay, like, well, my next promotion is based on this deliverable, and if these guys leave, I'm
Right.
screwed, kind of thing. And so there
Right.
was a lot of that. So I think
Okay.
professionally and selfishly, we should have left years before. You know,
Mm,
and that would have gotten us on our positive track years earlier. But I needed like this kind of like lightning strikes, very obvious kind of marketing, or I keep saying market adjustment to be like,
sure.
that's it. It's so obvious. I can't ignore it. It's time to leave. Right. I would have found
Right.
something else to do. Right. Leave 3 years earlier. Something else would have appeared. You know what I mean? Like, and then I would have sold it for whatever, bought a boat or whatever people do when they sell the
Sure.
company. Like, I don't
you
know.
can
Like, so
you can buy a boat in 2027. That's fine. There'll still be
there
boats.
you go. Yeah. On the muddy Allegheny River, so.
That's right. That's right. Hey, so Dennis, something that I was curious about, you
Yeah.
kind of went from a smaller, nimble team. I think Cyber Crucible is a little bit bigger. Like how many employees do
Just a
you
little
have?
bit. I think we have about 10 people. We
And
try
then
to still do independent contractor whenever possible, though.
right, right. And because I think something that you had mentioned when we met last week was you're always looking for the unicorns, right? The individual who's going to help you bridge that next gap, overcome that next hurdle, make your program, your AI even better. So can you tell us, maybe tell the audience a little bit about your philosophy for finding the right people? Like, how do you do it? Right.
Yeah.
I'm curious in that. Like, how do you find that unicorn? Like, what, when
Right.
you're looking
Right.
for a unicorn, what does that look like for you? Because you've obviously been very successful in finding them, putting them to good use, and then building your brand and company.
The thing that I found to be successful, and it plays into the, we'll say, the vulnerability of having a very open and transparent kind of flow of communication to the employees, and contracts a little bit different, right? But
Sure.
you have to be able to hire and give them a chance during the hiring process. Especially for engineers, they'll uh, they'll show us like 10 things they do, and then I'll say like, great, we want you to create a little project around an 11th thing, and they're like, oh, you're going to take my, some people are like, oh, you're going to take my code and use it. And I'm like, no, if you're just learning how to do it, trust me, like I have no use for your broken code, like, so, but the point is can you stretch yourself and learn and adapt to new problems? Or are
Mm,
you just complacent and are better at being that sustainment person who's just good at, documenting code or writing something that's already been invented? And
right.
we end up stretching past, or past known known kind of patterns to unknown territory and trying things out and failing. You don't have to bat 1,000, but you should have a solid batting average of, hey, I tried this thing out, it worked. I have 4 failures that show you it didn't work. I documented it, but I needed to find the one way that did work. And so we try to
Right.
make sure that they're creative enough to, and desire to learn something new. They put up there. I always tell them, hey, go ahead and you can keep rights to that. I don't want it, like we're not going to use it. But it shows us that you're learning something new and that you can learn something new. That really helps us a lot, because it gets people who are hungry. We're not an organization as a bootstrap company who's ever going to be able to compete with like the big VC and private equity owned people on cash basis, right? Never
Sure.
going to happen. So I can
Yep.
compensate them in other ways. I've
Mhm.
learned as I've gotten bigger that, every time I'm like, oh, you know what, I'm much bigger, I should get like a cash, like I should go for like the most expensive something, right? And then it turns out that we're just not the fit because they're quite content to just earn their cash and work at a slower pace. The
Yep.
passion is not there. We all have different priorities and different parts of life, right? So I get it, right? I don't
Sure.
I don't fault them for it, but I've learned that it's not simply based off of like sort by salary to get the highest. And of course, every time I say that, then there's always, a concern like, well, okay, do you sort by lowest, like low ball that, like I'm like, no. But the unicorn thing, it's difficult, right? Because, you have the salary bands a bigger company would have because they have that regimented role. You're expected to sit there, you do 40, 40 support tickets a day, like, and don't do more, don't do less, just do 40. And that doesn't exist in like a company like ours or others, maybe possibly small companies where you're like, well,
Mm,
I have this like bucket of things that I need to get done. And this guy or woman came and said, hey, I can do this. And I'm like, well, her ask is like too much for what, this part is, but let me check out my like secret stash of like bucket things that like I've just never had time or the person, and be like, well, okay, I can stretch now and afford it.
yeah.
Because they can also go ahead and they can do other things, or completely not do anything at all that I presented and just I'm looking in the bucket and I'm like, actually, I had this thing that we want to do. We didn't think we'd find someone though. And so it's a lot more of like, what can I afford and where in the bucket, where in the requirements and vision, can we fulfill those requirements?
Totally makes sense. And for your type of company, you don't need somebody who's just going to fit into a box, right? It's really
Yeah.
interesting. You mentioned kind of stretching the individual as part of the interview process, right? Even having them work on projects where they have an opportunity to get it wrong a few times and then come up with
Yeah.
something that's directionally moving in the right direction beyond the bounds of what was known. I talk about this with my team when we're bringing somebody on and we're doing a panel interview. It's like the best thing we could do is get to a question where they're like, you know what? Great question. Actually, don't know. But if I had to figure it out, and then like you start seeing the wheels turning, right? And they're starting
Yeah.
to push beyond the realm of, hey, maybe it's a compliance related area that they're not familiar with because they're not based out of California. Or that's fine.
Right.
I,
Oh
I don't
yeah.
I don't mind that you don't know the compliance piece. Like you can go and drop that into ChatGPT, get the 5 paragraph summary, and have everything that you need to do it very well once you get on the job. But given you don't know that, how are you going to think about getting the right information or
Right.
figure out directionally what approach you would take? And so I think it's in that approach that you spot the unicorns, what you're calling them, the people
Right.
who
Yeah.
are going
That's a
to be
great
able to
way of
push
putting it.
beyond the bounds
And
of
then
what's
if they were knowledgeable on the topic we give them, then they could do it in like a day, you know.
yeah,
We have seen people who just like kind of lightning strikes, and there's kind of like, oh, this reminded me of the other thing I did, and then 4 hours later, they're like, here, the project is done. Other people though, um, it takes them like a week or two, and we give them time, right? And then they're kind of like, well, that was like a lot. And I'm like, well, it wasn't really. You've never done it before, like
yeah,
if I were hiring you for that job, and it took you a week, I'd be like, oh, what's going on here? That's like, like my guy did a sample project just to make sure it was doable, and he did it in like 2 hours, and so,
yeah,
um, but it's always good to like, see the tangible. I agree, the creativity, the tangible results. We never shy away from, if they can't answer something we really need, to say, okay, come back in 2 weeks, and let's have a even more thorough discussion on that topic to see if you've had time to research it, and you can discuss it. Because then we know, just it's exactly the same as you. Like, maybe they got a bunch of white papers they downloaded or something, like, or got Chat GPT to write. If they give me one of those, I'm going to say, I don't. What am I supposed to do with this? Like, this doesn't show me that you know what you're doing. Let's have a
right,
discussion about it. Be prepared to discuss a Q&A about it now that you've read what Chat GPT wrote,
right, right,
and
right.
understand it.
Exactly. Yeah. Can you tell me how you can actually plug this into reality? Right. I think
Right.
is
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
kind of that. Well, Dennis, I know we're about out of time. This was super fun. It was really cool hearing your story and kind of how you went about it. It didn't seem like you ever intended to be an entrepreneur. Maybe that was in the back of your mind, but you kind of had the experience of a layoff, right? And then you're like, how do I go and make this work as a 19-year-old who the minimum qualifications are 5 years of experience and me and all my friends only have two? Like, what the hell do we do
Yeah,
now?
yeah. It
Right.
it was always, it's always outcome based. It's like, well, if I want to do
Yeah.
things, I guess I have to do this, like, and then it was like, well, any more than like, well, I'm out of peanut butter. I guess I need to go buy more.
That's awesome. Well, Dennis, all right. What I always end with is very curious from your perspective as a founder, as an entrepreneur, somebody who is doing a really good job running their company in the business world. What advice would you give to someone else who's maybe, 19 to 25, who's thinking about venturing out on their own, hasn't taken the step yet? What piece of advice would you give them?
you know, you have those like Instagram people who, and they're curiously always like attractive, which is annoying, but like, the who are like, oh, just follow your
It's
dreams,
just a
like leave it.
filter.
Great, don't tell me that. Like makes me ride with like a filter. But anyway, please don't do it. Like, uh, I see them like follow your dreams. Oh, like I left everything and went to like, I lived in Dubai in this like penthouse, and I followed I'm like, okay, like none of this is real. Yeah. But like, the sooner you can get started with like getting things going, I've seen people delay starting their company because they had to like learn how to like do a purchase order. My advice was always like, if if a GED earning like plumber making more money than I do at some points in my life, can scrap together a PO on a cocktail napkin that I had to pay, surely we don't need to go to school, to like, or spend 6 months researching how to do that, right? How to get paid
Yep.
for doing work. So I always tell people, get started. Don't worry about having to have some kind of special training or whatever. There's so many things that are on the job training with this being an entrepreneur. You're going to learn it on the way anyway. Like, you're never going to be
Yep.
satisfied with comfortable, and you should keep yourself uncomfortable, for quite a while. I look at my exit and I think, when, there's going to be a point where I become uncomfortable on the opposite side, where it's like no longer innovation. It's no longer, and then I'm like, okay, now I feel like I'm the weird one here, like, and so that it just comes in cycles, right? And my advice is, get started. That's really what it is.
Love it. Dennis Underwood, CEO of Cyber Crucible. Hey, Dennis, thanks for having you on the show. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the conversation, man.
Appreciate it, Greg. Thank you so much for your time.